Our first speaker, James Aalan Bernsen, and this session is sponsored by Allison Books, an ABAA and ILAB member. Dr. Bernsen is a native of Castroville, Texas. After 9/11, he joined the United States Navy as an intelligence officer. Some of you swabbies in here, some other ones. I was in the Marines, sorry. That's our nickname for the Navy. He's been deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, and aboard the USS Ronald Reagan in the Western Pacific. He has been awarded the Defense Meritorious Service Award, the Joint Services Commendation Medal, and the Joint Service Achievement Medal. He currently serves as an instructor at the U.S. Navy Information Warfare Training Command in Virginia Beach, Virginia. He holds a bachelor's degree in journalism and German from Texas A&M, master's in history from Texas State University, and is a graduate with distinction from the U.S. Naval War College. His new book, which I bought but haven't got to yet, is the winner of the 2025 Carr Collins Award for Best Nonfiction Book from the Texas Institute of Letters, the Presidio La Bahia Award, and the Kate Brox Bates Award. His paper is entitled The Lost War for Texas, the Louisiana Purchase, Mexican Revolution, and the Largest Filibuster in History. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Bernsen.
Good morning, everybody. Fortunately, we did that introduction because it's kind of playing into why the way I did my research. I think it's going to be kind of relevant. So this topic is an excerpt from my book, which is The Lost War for Texas. It was the subtitle is Mexican Rebels, American Burrites, and the Texas Revolution of 1811. Now you're probably thinking, what is this guy talking about? Texas Revolution was in 1836. We all know that, right? Well, what if everything you thought you knew about Texas history was wrong? Ooh, yeah, revisionist. Well, maybe it's just half the story, right? It's not necessarily wrong. It's just you need more context. Texas actually had two revolutions, not just one. And this first revolution was launched by the native Tejanos in San Antonio in 1811. However, Anglo-Americans fought alongside Mexicans as allies 23 years before the Alamo. And this first revolution was actually bigger than the later Texas Revolution of 1836, both in terms of the number of combatants and the number of people killed in the battles. So you're probably wondering, okay, what is this? Why have I not heard of it? There's a reason you haven't heard of it. It's not in the Teaks. So no one's heard of it unless you've read a couple of books that have been out there. But there are parts of the story you may recognize. So what is the Texas Revolution of 1811? You'll never find this title anywhere because it doesn't have a name. It's a war without a name. I had to give it a name. So in my book, I called it the Texas Revolution of 1811 because that's when it starts. It's basically the Mexican War for Independence as it's fought in Texas. So if you know a little Mexican history from your Texas history, you heard about the Grito and Diez y Seis, but you never really heard of what happened in Texas. Mexico declares starts a revolution. What happens in Texas? It's not in our curriculum. What happens, however, in Texas is 3 or 4 months after the Grito, actually that was in September, so in January of 1811, the people of San Antonio revolt against the Spanish army. This is called the Casas Revolt. And they basically seize power in San Antonio, arrest the governor, send him to Mexico in chains, where he's actually going to be freed and able to roam around again. And so Texas is kind of like this quasi-Mexican independent Mexican state for 2 months, and then the royalists in town are going to recapture the city in what's called the Zambrano coup of March 1811. The next stage is going to be a very brief abortive filibuster, and we're going to have to define terms here. This is a history audience, so you're not as bad as most of the people I talk to who go, filibuster, oh my God, it's the U.S. Senate. No, filibuster has nothing to do in the modern understanding. It comes from the word freebooter. It's basically a mercenary invasion of a country by outsiders. And so this first filibuster is called the Menchaca filibuster. briefly goes into Texas, but they actually don't even have any battles. They retreat after their leader is bribed off by the Spanish and abandons their army. Then what the next phase that comes really opens up the conflict is the Gutierrez-McGee filibuster. That's what I call this largest filibuster in Texas history, the most successful too. And it has several key pitched battles. We're going to talk about a few of those. And the part, if you've heard any of this story at all, this sounds kind of confusing. You probably heard of the Battle of Medina, right? That's the largest battle ever fought in Texas. But the way it's taught is just taught as this thing in isolation. Oh, there was a battle. Well, there was a whole war involved. It's just the last straw in this narrative. So my book goes into this, but I want to talk here because we're specifically talking about the GLO and maps and looking at how Texas developed. I want to talk about Texas in terms of maps. So I'm going to talk about the map that made Texas possible. What does anybody have any idea what I'm talking about? I'll give you a hint. It was on my first slide. It's the Louisiana Purchase. Because nothing of what we know of modern Texas history would have happened without that. There's a lot of things that happen, and we don't teach this because we have these little borders. Okay, it's across the Sabine River, therefore it's not Texas history. So let's leave that to American history in a whole different year in school, and we don't connect these things. But they're all interconnected. The Napoleonic Wars are a huge part of what makes Texas possible because Napoleon conquers Spain and puts his brother on the throne. So that's going to play into a lot of this. So here are a couple of things that happened in Texas as a result of the Louisiana Purchase. Remember, this is 1803. So first of all, smuggling is out of control in Texas. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. It's endemic in Texas, always has been. But now that America is on the frontier instead of it was Spanish Louisiana at the time, it's going to get even worse from the Spanish perspective. And this is a trade in ideas as well as just goods. We're going to see the growth of burrism. And this is, again, we're defining a few terms. My book has the word burrites. A lot of people, might not know that term. It's followers of Aaron Burr. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Everybody should know Aaron Burr. And if not, we'll talk a little bit about him some more. And then, so these are people who see Texas, and specifically all of Mexico, all of South America, in fact, as fertile grounds for expansion of republicanism. Not necessarily America. They're not yet doing the Manifest Destiny thing, but they're looking at spreading liberty, republicanism, and guess what? We're going to make money while we do it. That's how people work. And then most specifically for this border region is the growth of a group of banditti, these bandits who are going to infiltrate the borderlands between Texas and Louisiana. So let's look at what Texas looked like at the time. You can't really get a good map that shows, obviously the border wasn't here, it was the Nueces River. But so under French control, okay, you have Natchitoches, Louisiana right here, and Nacogdoches, Texas are 90 miles apart. That seems like great for trade, right? Except you can't. This border says no. The Spanish don't want anybody trading with the French. So that they're blocking trade for the people of Texas. Now, even so, what they end up having to do, they have to send all their trade through Bayard, San Antonio. But of course, there's not much to buy in San Antonio. So everything really comes from Saltillo. That's where the large fair is that New Spain has. And anything that comes from Europe has to go through Veracruz, which can only come from one port in Spain, which is Cadiz. So what we're seeing is we've got 1,100 miles just to get to Veracruz and another 5,600, I think, to Cadiz. That's for any trade you want if you're in Nacogdoches. Bear cuts off, 600 miles off of that, maybe. But Nacogdoches, Louisiana is 90 miles away. If you think of the cost of moving goods by ox cart from Veracruz to Nacogdoches, and know that there's not a single bridge in Texas, all these rivers you have to wade your oxen across and their carts, the cost of any goods you want to buy is going to be about 4 or 5 times higher than what it would be otherwise. So that means smuggling is going to get out of control. Now, what happens when Spain takes over Louisiana is nothing changes. Even though this is still Spanish territory, the trade is still illegal. So the people of Texas are being starved by their own government of goods because of the Spanish mercantilist policy. And not only is it that they want to protect, the Spanish industry, but they also don't want the ideas, because even though Spain took over Louisiana, it's still French people there. The ideas that they're afraid of are still there. In my book, I talk about they're literally send out the cavalry looking for copies of Rousseau's book so that they can stop Jean-Jacques Rousseau's writings from getting into the social contract, from getting into Texas. That's what they're trying to stop more than anything, but also the goods as well, because of course they're protecting their industries. So of course, when America takes control, that's going to get even more lucrative and more interesting for the people of Texas to get their pots and pans and everything. We're going to talk here a little bit about the Burr conspiracy. So the reason the Burr conspiracy is such a huge point is because it connects directly as a result of the Louisiana Purchase. A little history, it's been a while since you've been in school or something, you talked about this. Aaron Burr is vice president of the United States under Jefferson. He gets in an argument with Alexander Hamilton, shoots Hamilton in a duel. Hamilton dies. He gets a musical. He's famous. Burr doesn't get a musical, right? So what's he going to do with his life? So he decides he's going to go west, and because people love him in the West. Apparently, everyone in the West hated Alexander Hamilton. There's a whole bunch of reasons, banks and all these kind of things involved in that. So he goes in the West and finds there's just this huge interest in stealing land from Spain. And he's going to hook up with this scheming guy. Let's go back. James Wilkinson, who's the senior U.S. Army commander in the West. He's a senior U.S. Army officer anywhere in the U.S. military. He's also a paid spy for Spain. So at the same time as he's our senior officer in the military, he's being paid by Spain. But he doesn't really love Spain. He loves their money, but he's trying to sneak and do sneaky things behind Spain's back. He basically betrays everybody in his life except his wife. He's honest to her, but everybody else he's going to stab in the back. But Aaron Burr likes these kind of people, so he hooks up with him, and they come up with this idea. They're going to invade Spanish territory and liberate it, because we think of Mexico today as this impoverished place. Back then, they saw it as this great land of opportunity. It had 1/7 of the world's production of silver at the time. So if you can liberate Mexico, the Mexican people get, freedom, democracy, and you get a ton of silver, that's a great thing, right? So that's what Burr and Wilkinson are talking about. So there's also a discussion about possibly seizing New Orleans. That's kind of a bait and switch, actually, but it is discussed, and that's really what ultimately is going to lead to Burr's trial for treason. So in New Orleans, he works with this shady group called the Mexican Association, which is a group of basically businessmen, traders, and they want access to Mexico. And so they're the ones who are going to be financing and supporting this Burr invasion of Mexico. But they're not just going in to get Texas or northern Mexico. This is their oath that they have their people sign. Well, to aid in affecting the emancipation of Mexico and Peru. So they're not just going to the Rio Grande. They're going to go all the way down to the Penguins. They're going to liberate all of South America, because there is gold. There's all these things in South America. And they think that, these people in South America, once you get rid of the institution, they'll work for the American gringos are going to come in and tell them how to run their countries, and then they're going to all make money and everyone's going to be happy. So they have really elaborate plans. And if you look at the trials, we have all the trial information, what they're trying to do. Their secret plan in 1803, 1804 was to attack West Florida, which is southern Alabama, Mississippi, eastern Louisiana. They're going to invade West Florida first, and then they're going to attack Texas. That was their plan that they were going to do in 1806. It doesn't happen because, remember, James Wilkinson likes to betray people. He feels he's too exposed, so he decides he's going to stab Burr in the back. So he stabs Burr in the back, rats him out to Thomas Jefferson, said, I didn't know anything about it. They were talking about it, and they said I was part of it. I'm innocent. And so he basically collapses the whole conspiracy. So Wilkinson and Burr lead the stage. But they're not the people who are really trying to do this. The people who are still pushing this are still around. It's these people, and also just the frontiersmen who had been recruited. And so what they're going to do is they're going to kind of bide their time. So we talked a little bit about the collapse. Wilkinson betrays Burr. The way he does it is he goes to the Spanish and he negotiates, because he has this connection with the Spanish. He's been their spy for a while. In fact, he's actually probably got a payout from Spain for collapsing the conspiracy. We haven't been able to prove that. So he betrays all these people, and then we get, as part of his agreement, he signs this agreement. Keep hitting the wrong button. So Wilkinson signs it with Simon Herrera, who is a Spanish commander on the scene in Nacogdoches, and they create a neutral ground between Natchitoches and Nacogdoches. It's basically a period, a space in between the two countries, where the two sides are just going to keep their militaries out until they can figure out who is, make a treaty and say, where is the border between the United States and Spain. So what happens when you have an ungoverned place of land, right? Bad things happen. T.R. Fehrenbach says, outlaws quickly get there. That's true. There's a little bit more to it than that, as is always the case with Fehrenbach. So let's look at what happens in the neutral ground itself. So you have these Spanish caravans that are coming through. Now, you're probably thinking, wait, he said there's no trade. Well, there is trade, just not the ordinary people get trade. The government can have trade. And so the Spanish government sends in these caravans into the neutral ground. They're going to Natchitoches to buy supplies. And you're thinking, oh, great, they're going to give supplies to their people, and the people are going to have pots and pans and whatever. They're not buying for the people of Texas. They're buying it for the Indians, because they need to bribe the Indians to not attack them. And so they go through, they get these caravans, they bring them into Nacogdoches full of all these great trade goods and all these wonderful things. And the people in Nacogdoches, they're wearing rags, and they see these nice cloth, and they're going right to the Indians. So this is kind of creating this antagonism among the people. And the people in Nacogdoches are connected to the people in Natchitoches. They have these smuggling rings, and the smuggling ultimately will become revolutionary. It's inherent in the way these kind of things happen. So what happens when you have this ungoverned land is you get these banditti, and they come in, and they just stop these caravans. They stop a couple caravans, arrest the smugglers. The guy named Samuel Davenport, he's an American, but he works for the Spanish government. He's leading the caravans. So they're blocking these caravans. A couple things they're doing that start off essentially as crime, but eventually become revolutionary, especially as these Burrites get connected to these people, is first of all, they're targeting the competition, because the smugglers want to have the monopoly of the trade. They're also wrecking Spanish Indian policy. So this is starting to happen in 1810, right before the outbreak of the Mexican Revolution, or Mexican War of Independence. So the Spanish are trying to get these trade goods to buy off the Indians. It ultimately becomes an economic blockade of Texas, which puts Texas in a vice, which makes all the other problems worse that Texas is facing. And it creates an opportunity for a filibuster, because you have this armed force on the frontier, and the Americans and Mexican and Spanish are going to try to stop it. They actually send in a joint patrol of American and Spanish troops, and they try to stop it unsuccessfully. So this leads to the Gutierrez-McGee expedition, the largest filibuster in Texas history. August 1812, an army of 150 Americans, tiny force, with a few Spanish and Mexican deserters, basically, enter from Louisiana and invade Spanish Texas. They're led by Augustus McGee. He's a former U.S. Army lieutenant, and Jose Bernardo Gutierrez de Lara, who is a Mexican revolutionary sent to the United States to help get support for the Mexican cause. So Gutierrez has been promised, hey, you can get this, we'll get this army in and open up Texas. And the key reason is, what do they want out of Texas? They want a highway for goods, because at this point, the Mexican Revolution started. The rebels don't have a navy. Where are they going to get their supplies? Where are they going to get their foreign fighters who are going to support them? That's what they're going to do in Texas. So they're going to come into Texas. It's an Anglo force entirely, eventually going to become mixed as they add people. Very quickly through the timeline, my book goes into this in a lot more detail, obviously. They come in through Nacogdoches pretty easily. They move down to La Bahia. And then we have it's shocking that people don't know about this event, the Siege of La Bahia. So how long was the Siege of the Alamo? Does anybody know? The Siege of the Alamo was how many days? 13 days. This is 98 days. 7 times longer than the Alamo. There's the Siege of La Bahia at the Presidio. And there's several battles. There are smaller skirmishes at first. The most important one is the Battle of the White Cow. It's actually, the two armies are starving, and this cow escapes from the Spanish side. He's coming to the Presidio, and they actually have a fight over this cow, and 200 people die, and they record all that, but no one recorded who got the cow. My son still wants to know who got the cow. So the siege lasts a long time, but ultimately, the Spanish can't hold it up. Texas is collapsing. There's no army in San Antonio. It's being raided by Comanches, so they have to flee, and they go back. They fight the Battle of Rosillo, which is just south of San Antonio, and the Spanish military is defeated there, and essentially Texas is opened up. So Republicans take Texas. They have a Declaration of Independence, the first in Texas history, but also the first in Mexican history, because Mexico has not declared independence. And the Tejanos kind of get revenge against the Royalist officers, so they're going to execute 14 of the Royalist officers. I'm going to skip through a couple of these things, just go very briefly. The Spanish are going to try to take Texas. They're going to send an initial force in there. They're going to be defeated at the Battle of Aalan, which is it's a forgotten battle, except I found in the National Archives, I found a map, and so I can tell you exactly where it's at. It's Sidney Lanier High School in San Antonio. So the Spanish are defeated in this first attempt. That's in July of 1813. And then the Spanish will come in under General Arredondo, who's the senior Spanish commander. And they're going to lead to what, if you've heard this part of the story, you know the Battle of Medina. Obviously, we don't know where the site is, but it's somewhere in this kind of area just south of San Antonio. Long story short, it's a very bloody battle. About 1,000 rebels are killed and about 700 royalists. Largest battle in Texas history. And the rebels almost win, but they're actually defeated by the Spanish. And that's why this story is kind of lost, because so many people died and the rebel control of Texas collapsed. So the refugees flee. I'm gonna leave out all the details. You can read it again. Buy my book. You can read it all. Brutal things happen in San Antonio. 1/3 of the population of San Antonio is killed or exiled in 2 weeks. And so, and the bodies are in the street for 7 months later. They're still lying. There are people protesting to the governor because there's children climbing on the piles of dead bodies. So it's a pretty brutal conquest. I like to say that the entire population of San Antonio had PTSD, because that's what would have happened. The men are put in a granary. A lot of them die in there because it's airless. The women are put in this terrible prison called La Quinta. And really briefly on the legacy, why is this relevant? I like to say this is the World War I of Texas history. You can't understand 1836 if you don't know what happened in 1811 to 13, because it's just like World War II. If you tried to understand the rise of World War II without knowing World War I, it wouldn't work. It paves the way for Anglo settlement, because the Spanish had broken Texas. They need settlers, and where are you going to get them? They can't get them in the middle of their revolution. Moses Austin has the solution, and that leads to a lot of different things. And it's going to shape the future decisions. One of these Spanish officers in this army was this young lieutenant named Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. And he sees brutality in 1836 won the day. The Spanish were totally brutal, and the rebellion stopped completely. And Santa Anna is going to take that message to heart, and he's going to use it in Zacatecas, and he's going to use it in Texas. That's going to be his modus operandi. So this is a crucial event. I think it's the most important forgotten story in American history and in Texas history because it has so many tie-ins. There are veterans who come in 1836 who fight in the Revolution in 1836. So there's a lot more information out there, a lot of important events that really need to be brought back to our understanding. And that's why I wrote the book. It was the first really full-length book on this topic in 80 years. And I found a lot of art stuff and genealogical stuff that had never been discovered before. So there's a lot more to this. I encourage everybody, if you get a chance, to check out my book. You can go to lostwarfortexas.com. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Texas A&M University Press. Thank you very much.